Ignition sequence starts.
Good morning, and welcome to this view of the activity inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room. These are the men and women who are helping the Expedition 65 crew members as they move through the last few hours of their scheduled work week in low Earth orbit. Commander Aki Hoshide and his crewmates had a lot of science support activity on their collective plates this week, all of which came after he and French astronaut Thomas Pesquet completed the 7th spacewalk of the expedition last weekend.
Houston Station on Space to Ground.
Welcome to Space to Ground. I'm Shaniqua Vereen. This week, NASA announced an extended mission for an astronaut and cosmonaut, completed a spacewalk, and saw some spicy blooms aboard the International Space Station. On Sunday, September 12th, European Space Agency astronaut Thomas Pesquet and Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Aki Hoshide ventured outside the Quest airlock to prepare for more solar array upgrades. The spacewalkers installed a modification kit or support bracket to prepare the outside of the station for future rollout solar array installation work. After a successful trip outside, the pair returned after 6 hours and 54 minutes.
Space to Ground.
All astronauts are explorers at heart, and having the opportunity to contribute to furthering exploration is a great opportunity.
Meanwhile, Tuesday, NASA announced that NASA astronaut Mark Vande Hei and Roscosmos cosmonaut Pyotr Dobrov would remain aboard the space station until March 2022. Upon return to Earth, Vande Hei will hold the record for longest single spaceflight for an American, edging out former NASA astronaut Scott Kelly with a whopping 353 days spent in space. And the science on board the station is good enough to eat. Well, sort of. NASA astronaut Megan MacArthur shared photos of some of the first flowers blooming from 4 pepper plants growing in the advanced plant habitat aboard the International Space Station.
So looking in the center of the 2 flowers that I can see most easily, there is definitely a dark green form at the base of the flower.
Plant Habitat 4 experiment is one of the most challenging plant experiments to date, in part because of the long germination and growing times of the peppers. NASA astronaut Shane Kimbrough initiated the experiment on July 12, and the peppers will grow for 120 days, with astronauts harvesting the chilies in late October and then again in early November. That's Space to Ground. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
That announcement from Roscosmos that 2 spaceflight participants will be on the October Soyuz flight to the International Space Station has special impact for 2 members of the Expedition 65 crew. Since the spaceflight participants will come home with Soyuz Commander Oleg Novitsky after their short mission, NASA's Mark Vande Hei and cosmonaut Pyotr Dobrov will remain on the station until the next Soyuz arrives in March of 2022. Vande Hei will come home with the longest ever single spaceflight by an American astronaut, passing the long flight marks set by Scott Kelly and Christina Cook.
Honestly, it's exciting. I think all astronauts are explorers at heart, and having the opportunity to contribute to furthering exploration is a great opportunity. My family's been braced for this. I've been braced for this. It's something that we expected, and honestly, it's got a sense of novelty to it for me. It's a new experience, and I'm looking forward to, as a human being, understanding how it feels to do something like this. Well, first of all, I don't think it's a record that I would even attribute to me. It's a record for our space program. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Scott and Christina both, and I know they would both be extremely happy, as the explorers that they are, to see that we're furthering exploration. We're getting people into space for longer and longer periods of time. I expect this record to be broken, and that will be a further success for our space program. So there is certainly a very, very important psychological element. And for example, I try to spend some time meditating every day, talking to my family every day. I talk to my wife almost every day. Those things are hugely helpful. So not just being comfortable with yourself, but maintaining those connections to with the relationships we have on the ground that are so important to us is super, super important as well. what we're doing in effect is practicing keeping people healthy on a long trip through space where people don't have the force of the Earth's surface resisting us from being in this, what I again call a free fall. So we're practicing for missions like that right now. The big difference is when we get our first folks to Mars, we're not going to have a staff of nurses and doctors there to make sure we're healthy and take care of us. No one's going to be there to help us extract us out of the spacecraft. We've got to make sure that astronauts are healthy enough to take care of all of those things on their own when they're very far away from Mother Earth. So being able to contribute to that is something I will always be very, very proud of.
Astronauts on the International Space Station, like Mark Vande Hei, spend some of their time helping explain scientific concepts to students on Earth. In this demonstration video, one-time station commander Sonny Williams guides us as Vande Hei and Jeff Williams use the weightless environment to demonstrate Newton's first law of motion.
Hi, I'm Sonny Williams, and I'm an astronaut who's lived and worked aboard the International Space Station, an amazing research laboratory that's orbiting the Earth about 250 miles above us. While we're at the space station, we astronauts live and work in a microgravity environment. Do you think the laws of physics will hold up in the space station while experiencing microgravity? Let's check with NASA astronaut Mark Vande Hei on the International Space Station to find out.
Newton's first law of motion says an object at rest tends to stay at rest unless acted on by an outside force. Also, an object in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted on by an outside force, like my finger.
Let's look at this from another angle. Over time, the International Space Station slows down from experiencing a very small amount of drag, or force, from a tiny amount of atomic oxygen in space. This is like the force you feel from the air if you stick your hand out of a moving car. Because of this, the space station does what we call a reboost. A reboost uses rocket engines to put a force on the space station. This allows it to speed up just a little to remain in orbit around the Earth. Let's join NASA astronaut Jeff Williams to check out what happens to the objects inside the space station when it begins.
Now the way I'm going to demonstrate the acceleration that comes during the reboost is by using this camera. 800 millimeter lens, so it's pretty massive actually. And you can see I can float it here, and there's no reboost going on right now, so the camera's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to slowly drift due to the ventilation, or if I put any velocity into it, it'll drift out of the scene. But I'm going to try to hold it here steady, and you can see that it stays very steady. There's my camera. I'm setting it up for ignition. There it goes. It actually came a little bit early. Now watch the camera accelerate toward you. There it goes. I'm going to reach out and grab it and bring it back in the view here. And I'm holding it. I'm actually feeling the acceleration. I'm going to let go again. And here it goes. It's going to take off. I'll try not to let it hit you. Just going to miss you. Yeah, I'm going to let go now. And here I go, drifting back toward you again. So the acceleration applies to me too. Reached our 2.7 meters per second that we desired, and now if I let go of the camera, it's not going anywhere, so the burn is over. Reboost complete. We'll stay in orbit for a little while longer.
Can you use Newton's first law to explain why the camera began moving without an astronaut putting a force directly on it? I'm going to send you back to class so you can start to investigate this with the Classroom Connection found at nasa.gov/demonstrations. Thanks for exploring a little physics on the space station with us today. See you again soon.
Supporting scientific research and providing benefits to people on Earth are two of the overarching goals of the International Space Station program. Another big goal is encouraging the growth of a commercial space economy. And in the last few years, the station program has been making good progress on that front too. Take a look.
The International Space Station has proven to be a one-of-a-kind laboratory. Microgravity conditions allow for experiments impossible to duplicate on Earth. New science, new knowledge. The station has also proven to have the capacity to serve as an incubator for new business, accelerating the development of a new space economy in low Earth orbit. The business of doing business on the International Space Station has become a primary focus of NASA in the last 10 years. Mike Reed is the manager of Space Station Business and Economic Development for NASA at Johnson Space Center. He explains how businesses are enabling research. Supporting all of the research activities on station is becoming a significant activity in and of itself. Companies like Bioserve, TechShot, Space Tango, and others operate over 20 commercial research facilities housed on the station. Scores of companies provide services as payload developers, helping researchers translate their experiments into hardware small and light enough to be transported to and housed on the station. All of these commercial activities support business models and expand the numbers of entities with experience in conducting business in space. As NASA increases the opportunities for companies to perform research on the space station, it's likely that the number and types of companies taking advantage of those opportunities will also increase. That in turn will help keep the partnership between NASA and business thriving. Reed notes, soon we hope to see private astronauts as part of NASA's LEO Commercial Development Program. Some of those may be researcher astronauts. That is, researchers who work directly for a company and are trained to come work in the station during private astronaut missions. To enable the beginning of development for a next-generation, commercially built and operated low Earth orbit research platform, the space station is hosting new commercial modules. The NanoRacks Bishop airlock became operational in February 2021. And Axiom Space plans to launch a module to expand the habitable volume for research and other activities on the station. NASA's commercial resupply and commercial crew programs are also enabling multiple companies to develop and operate the next generation of spacecraft and launch systems. This commercial transportation to and from the station has fueled the growing market share of U.S. launch providers in the world marketplace, and is providing expanded utility, additional research time, and broader opportunities for discovery for NASA's mission of space exploration. The innovative use of public-private partnerships employed to support station research is becoming the template for NASA's new exploration initiatives. The Artemis program has the goal of landing the first woman and first person of color on the surface of the moon. In addition, Artemis plans include establishing a lunar outpost built by private companies, and eventually harvesting resources from the moon. Doing business in space has become one of the fastest growing businesses on Earth. The space economy has expanded by over 60% in the last decade, and is now valued at roughly $400 billion. That commercial success is matched in importance by the knowledge gained from private research conducted on the space station. It's knowledge that spans hundreds of disciplines and will help millions here on Earth, as well as those traveling beyond the reaches of our planet for years to come. For more information about how private companies can conduct their research on the space station, go to www.nasa.gov/ISS-science. To discover more about the space on, around, and beyond our planet, visit science.nasa.gov. space.nasa.gov.
Using the International Space Station, scientists are learning how to grow food in space. It's food we'll need to feed the men and women who will be on our future missions away from the Earth, out to Mars. Today, our colleagues from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center show us how space-grown food can be combined into an actual human meal.
What do I do with my hands? Okay. Hey everyone, welcome to Snack Time with NASA. I'm your host, Kathleen Gaeta. Now, we've been exploring all the ways that NASA helps get some of your favorite foods onto your plate. And so far, all of those foods have been down here on Earth, obviously. But we're NASA, right? So while we may not be professional chefs, we do know a thing or two about space. That's why today we'll be learning what it takes to grow food 200 miles above our heads on board the International Space Station. And later, we'll hear how the space station helps us monitor the health of plants down here on Earth. So let's get into it. As you can see, I have a nice haul of greens right in front of me. Some romaine lettuce, some bok choy, radishes, microgreens. Now, I got all these ingredients from my local grocery store, but actually every single one of these plants is grown on board the ISS. And here to help explain how that happens is Matt Romine, project scientist at the Kennedy Space Center. Matt, thank you so much for being here. How's it going?
Oh, it's going good. Glad to be here, Kathleen.
Yeah, so you sent me a list of vegetables that you work with, and I'm wondering how you go about choosing which foods to grow up in space.
We have to do a lot of crop screening, and we get able to screen these crops and test them in our grow chambers at Kennedy Space Center that are able to replicate the environmental conditions on the International Space Station, except for microgravity. We're looking for how productive they grow, we're looking for compact morphologies, and crops that are nutritious and flavorful.
Okay, and I have to ask, have you ever grown potatoes in space?
Well, we've been growing crops recently on ISS, last 5 years or so. We have done potatoes recently, but in the past we've done them on the shuttle program, and we've grown them extensively on the ground at Kennedy Space Center.
I will eat a space potato in my lifetime, I promise you that. Anyways, so you suggested I pick up some bok choy and mustard greens, and I can't say those are typical salad ingredients for myself.
The bok choy is interesting because the crew recently grew and got to eat that on ISS, and they really enjoyed it. They actually found a way to cook it using their food warmer and combining some garlic paste, soy sauce, and a bit of olive oil. The mustard greens are great because they have a lot of strong flavors. And when you're an astronaut on ISS, in microgravity, you have a diminished sense of taste and smell. So they like those bolder flavors to kind of punch through there.
Wow, I did not know that. And now, do you also grow the same plants that you're growing in space down at KSC?
Yeah, when we're growing plants in space on ISS, we also have ground controls at KSC that replicate the exact conditions on ISS, temperature, the humidity, the CO2 levels. Control for everything but the microgravity element.
Okay, and I assume that's so that you can more closely monitor the difference of plants growing in space versus on Earth. What have you discovered in that process?
Well, we find that plants for the most part grow similar in space as on Earth. A big variable is the water. There's a lack of convective flow in space, and that makes water very sticky. Plants like a good mix of water and oxygen in their root zone, and when we have water that doesn't mix well with oxygen, we get a lot of swinging back and forth between the roots being flooded and being in a state of drought. We have technologies that are working on that to solve that problem with microgravity. Luckily, when we get to Mars and the Moon, those problems mostly go away.
Got it. And so talk to me about this little space garden I keep hearing of, the veggie growth system. What is that?
Yeah, the veggie, we've got 2 of those in ISS, and it's a real simple system. It's about the size of a piece of carry-on luggage. It uses LED lighting, and it has 6 little plant pillows in them that are filled with growth media, which is basically a soil substitute. And that's how we're able to grow and propagate the plants in ISS.
That's so interesting. The vision of a space garden just brings a lot of joy to me, and I'm sure a lot of people. Anyway, so is there a plant that you're kind of the most excited about trying to grow in space?
Definitely peppers. We actually just sent chili peppers to ISS, and they'll be growing this summer. And we're really excited about peppers because they're very challenging. They take a long time to germinate. They take a long time to grow, about 120 days. And there's a real challenge with the flavor of the fruit. If we were to overwater them, they would taste like grass clippings. If we underwater and we stress them out a lot, they're gonna get real spicy. So we're trying to really control for growing healthy plants and flavorful plants that the correction wants to eat and enjoy.
Right. And you know what they say, if you can't take the heat, get off the space station, right? Just kidding, that's my dad joke of the day. Anyways, well, Matt, I can't thank you enough for being here. I learned a lot, and I hope you all did as well, and I can't wait to hear what you grow in space next.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Shut your little door, Bowie. I can't hear. Okay. So now that we know more about crops aboard the space station, what about the crops we study from the space station that live down here on Earth? And for that, Christine Lee, applications lead from the EcoStress mission, is here to talk to us. Hey, Christine, thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you. Glad to be here.
I was just talking with Matt about how the Veggie Lab on the ISS helps us better understand how plants grow in microgravity, and that's inspired all of the ingredients here for this salad. But I also know that instruments on the ISS help us better understand how plants grow down on Earth. I'm wondering how that is.
Well, the instrument and project that I work on, the Ecosystem Spaceborne Thermal Radiometer Experiment on Space Station, also known as EcoStress, collects thermal data from on board the International Space Station, and we use this thermal data to better understand vegetation water stress here on Earth. And so we can apply this data in understanding crop water stress, looking at drought across forests, in climate vulnerable areas all around the world.
And so I know that we also look at the temperature of plants, and I can't say I know why we do that.
We look at the temperature of plants because plants contain a lot of water. It's part of their process for photosynthesizing, and the temperature is directly related to the water content within those plants. And so the hotter a plant gets, we can use that as an indicator of how healthy that particular plant is.
Got it. Okay, so all this data is captured and collected. Who then uses it?
Well, we have a wide variety of partners. One of our key partners is the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They utilize the data to better understand crop water stress across different areas, primarily in the continental United States. And they use this to understand and inform decisions like irrigation and water management, as well as the onset of drought.
And so what advantages does EcoStress get being on the ISS?
We love being on the International Space Station. One of the really unique aspects of being on the ISS is that there's an variable overpass time. And what that means is that instead of taking measurements at the same time during each overpass, the way we might with other polar orbiting satellite missions, is that we actually get to take a snapshot of temperatures and water stress at different times of day. And what this then translates to is being able to look at the peak of vegetation water stress, which typically occurs in the mid to late afternoon. This is something that has not been done before, and being able to create this daily cycle of water stress for vegetation at these spatial and temporal scales.
Well, it seems to me that instruments on board the ISS are pretty crucial when it comes to monitoring our human-caused climate change. Climate change is bad.
Yes, and the really great thing about EcoStress is that it complements these other instruments and other satellites like Landsat to create a continuous long-term record of the Earth system. And right now, NASA is working on future missions that will build on these records to provide climate scientists a holistic view of the Earth. And this provides us really unique insights to how vegetation and forests around the world are reacting to environmental and climate stressors.
Well, you know, it's amazing to hear about all the science that goes into growing plants, both in space and on Earth. And on that note, I'm ready to appreciate some of that science by digging into the salad. Christine, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for watching. Cheers. You want a salad?
For all the years that men and women have flown in space, they've taken pictures out the window of their home planet. Those pictures are amazing, to be sure, but for the folks who took the pictures, it's still something of a strain to convey to us Earthlings just how miraculous that view really is.
When you look out into the depths of space, you realize just the vast ocean of darkness, and we're on this little island.
Without a doubt, When you are climbing on your rocket, when you're launching into space, when the engine cuts out and you get to look back at Earth, absolutely every sacrifice is worth it. Every dream is worth it. The entire road there is worth it. Every bit of it is worth it.
It almost, I dare say, grieved me to think about how in the world am I going to describe this?
I will never forget that sight. The thin blue line of the atmosphere, the curve of the horizon. That's when it became real. Really, at a gut level, I'm actually in space.
All life is connected on this planet, and everything I do is in one way or another going to affect someone else that I share this planet with, or some other creature that I share this planet with.
The most significant realization to me was looking out and realizing not how far I was from Earth, but how close I was to Earth and how connected I was to Earth.
I'd give a lot to see that view again.
Want another look at any of the stories you saw here today? Well, you can always find them on YouTube and Facebook, along with lots of other great features on a whole variety of NASA topics. If you're looking for good conversation about human spaceflight, you should check out Houston, We Have a Podcast, where today Gary Jordan gets into the weeds and all kind of other plants, learning how the eco-stress experiment on the International Space Station is studying how plants use water by measuring their temperatures from space. Go to nasa.gov/podcasts for this week's episode. All the previous episodes are there too. So is the full library of all NASA podcasts, which are also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and SoundCloud.